P. Diddy makes a third attempt to be released on bail, and this time it could actually happen. A new U.S. District Court judge has been appointed to the case, and now it's going to be up to him whether Diddy is released. Meanwhile, he's still behind bars in a Brooklyn jail that, according to his attorneys, has deplorable conditions.
The courtroom was silent as Diddy stood before the judge once again, but this time, the man who once carried himself with power and arrogance looked nothing like the untouchable mogul the world used to know. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the swagger.
We're taking a closer look at Diddy's day-to-day life incarcerated and his road to a possible release with attorney Randy Kessler. I'm Sierra Gillespie, and this is Law and Crime News. 54-year-old Sean P. Diddy Combs is entering his fourth week behind bars, being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. It's a far cry from his lavish life and mansions in Miami and Los Angeles, but ironically, it was the evidence collected at those mansions that put Diddy in jail in the first place. Back in March, federal investigators raided Diddy's homes in Florida and California, collecting evidence in the federal case against him. We now have a better idea about what investigators were collecting, including multiple AR-15 rifles with the serial numbers removed, a drum magazine, and illegal drugs. But Diddy doesn't face any charges for possession of those items. Instead, it was the electronic evidence that led to Diddy's charges. On September 16th, he was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. A main topic discussed in this indictment was freak-offs, described as elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. And the government alleges these freak-offs were not consensual. The indictment lays out a pattern of abuse that Diddy would often follow, drugging or forcing the victims to drink alcohol that was oftentimes laced with something, sexually assaulting these victims, and then forcing them to have sex with a prostitute. Now, the feds say they have evidence of these freak-offs because Diddy often recorded them. Investigators apparently have dozens of freak-off videos and collected more than 100 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, and storage devices. They allege Diddy used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during the freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. So these same recordings that were once used to keep victims quiet are now being used to prosecute Diddy in a sex trafficking scheme that goes back decades. The allegations against Diddy go back a while too, with survivors reporting abuse as far back as 1991. Last November, Cassandra Ventura, Diddy's ex, filed civil suit against him, citing years of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse during their relationship. Cassie mentioned the freak-offs, saying Diddy recorded them and used them to keep her quiet. After that, a dozen more civil suits were filed against Diddy, and they all followed the same pattern, alleging he drugged the victims, assaulted them, and recorded it. These lawsuits paved the way for Diddy's indictment and arrest, and there's actually more on the way. Weeks after Diddy's arrest, Houston-based attorney Tony Busby revealed he's planning to file 120 new civil lawsuits against Diddy with even more shocking allegations. These lawsuits will apparently include allegations of child sex abuse too. In one case, a kid as young as 9 years old. The lawsuits are also expected to reveal at least one high-profile name that was his legal team offered a pretty sizable bail package too, saying that Diddy would put up $50 million for his release. This would have been co-signed by Diddy, his sister, his mom, his 3 adult sons, and the mothers of 2 of his children. The defense also suggested Diddy would have major restrictions on travel, a GPS monitor, and even limitations on female visitors. This was presented to Judge Andrew L. Carter, who denied Diddy's bid for release. He argued the bail package was insufficient to guarantee the safety of the community or to maintain the integrity of the case. Before that, Magistrate Judge Robin Tarnowski also denied Diddy bail, highlighting his apparent anger issues and history of substance abuse. She also voiced concern about a danger to the community or witness tampering should Diddy be released. But just this week, Judge Arun Subramanian was assigned to Diddy's case. Subramanian was nominated by President Joe Biden in 2022.
Gone was the larger-than-life energy that used to command every room he entered. What stood before the judge now was a man broken by fear, by isolation, and by the reality of life behind bars. Diddy's voice trembled as he spoke. his words barely holding together as he pleaded for mercy. He told the judge that prison had become too dangerous, that he couldn't take it anymore, that every night felt like a fight to stay alive. He said he wasn't safe, that people were targeting him, that he was constantly living in fear. It wasn't a performance, it was desperation. The once proud mogul was now begging for his freedom. Those in the courtroom could feel the tension in the air. Some looked at him with pity, others with disbelief, and a few with quiet anger, but no one could deny the emotion pouring out of him. His voice cracked as he described the reality of his days and nights behind bars, the endless noise, the threats, the fear of being attacked again, the sleepless nights filled with paranoia. He told the judge that he wasn't made for this life, that the constant danger was destroying him mentally and physically. Diddy said he's barely eating, barely sleeping, and that he's lost control of himself. He admitted that he cries every night, haunted by the things he's seen and the people who whisper his name with hatred. He said that being locked up has taken him to the edge of his sanity, that he can't stop shaking.
And took the bench in 2023. Before that, he was a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Subramanian's no stranger to high-profile cases either. He's also overseeing the Department of Justice antitrust case against Ticketmaster. That's the case where the government alleges Ticketmaster has an unlawful monopoly on the market. That really came to light after the site crashed in 2022 when Taylor Swift fans rushed to get concert tickets. But back to P. Diddy. His team will make a third bid for release, this time to Judge Subramanian. In the meantime, he's still behind bars at MDC Brooklyn, and according to Diddy's legal team, the jail is notoriously dangerous and run down. Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, argues there are major issues with the jail, citing violence, poor conditions, overcrowding, and even staffing issues. He also cited some startling statistics. 2 inmates have been killed at MDC since June, and at least 4 inmates have died by suicide over the past 3 years. On top of that, 6 staff members have been charged with crimes over the past 5 years. When Diddy was first arrested, he was placed on suicide watch, which according to the DOJ's National Institute of Corrections is, quote, supervisory precautions taken for suicidal inmates that require frequent observation. Diddy's since been taken off suicide watch, but is still being housed in a protective care unit, actually the same one as Sam Bankman-Fried. Bankman-Fried was convicted of fraud and money laundering last November after the collapse of his cryptocurrency exchange, FTX. They're both in a separate section of MDC. That's a unit for inmates who require special protection. That's people like Diddy or Bankman-Fried who are high-profile inmates, but it also cares for other inmates who need protection as they assist in ongoing investigations in open cases. Now, according to some reports, Diddy has a few privileges that other inmates lack, including access to daily showers and slightly better food. In his nearly month-long stay at MDC, Diddy has had phone conversations with his children and even an in-person visit from his family. To take a deeper dive into Diddy's life behind bars and the likelihood that he'll soon be released, we're sitting down with attorney Randy Kessler. I mean, P. Diddy has been in the spotlight for decades. He's obviously got a pretty big bank account, living in mansions in multiple cities, and that's what he's used to. And all of a sudden, he's in a prison that's being described as deplorable. I mean, just that unto itself, is that a major change?
Of course, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. And I sort of think that's what the prurient interest of the public is. Jail is terrible for anybody, but for someone who's used to having people wait on them hand and foot and never stands in line and always, gets front row and gets the best table and gets to have the exact opposite, what a life-changing moment. I mean, it's just incredible. And, it brings into context our whole system of innocent till proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? And, we could debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent till proven guilty? Well, yeah, but, we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent till proven guilty. When you have this much evidence and so much stuff out there, does that affect the judge's decision whether to grant bond or not? And you can't think as a human being the judge isn't thinking that some people are more likely to be guilty than others. But the system says you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's sort of a shame that he's in jail. And what if he's vindicated? What if he's acquitted? Then how do you ever give him back those few months of incarceration? Just a lot of things going on here.
Let's talk about that bail because it was denied twice. So Diddy has been in jail for almost a month now at this point, 3 to 4 weeks. That's quite a long time and quite a far.
that he feels trapped in a nightmare he can't wake up from. The courtroom could hear the pain in his voice, the genuine fear behind every word. His lawyers stood beside him, visibly tense. They had already filed motions for emergency release, citing concerns for his safety after the violent incidents that had already happened inside. But this time, it wasn't just about paperwork, it was about Diddy himself speaking directly to the judge, begging for a second chance. He said that prison was not rehabilitation, that it was torment. He said he feared that if he stayed there any longer, something terrible would happen. According to sources close to the case, Diddy described how other inmates view him as a target. He told the court that his fame has made his situation worse, that he's constantly watched, constantly taunted, constantly tested. He said that no matter how much protection he's given, it's never enough. He said that even guards have turned on him, that he feels there's no one left to trust.
Cry from what he's used to. But that bail denial, both of the judges mentioned that he has some major resources, that he could flee because he has the money, access to private jets, things like that. Do you think that's a valid argument that these judges are making, that he could just flee and run away?
I mean, it's a legitimate concern. No judge wants to wake up and read the headlines the next day. Oh, they treated this guy special and they gave him bond, and now he's gone and he fled from justice. So that's what's in the back of most judges' minds. On the other hand, we deal with cases where clients have significant funds sometimes, and sometimes where there's money, you can craft a unique solution. Years ago it was the ankle bracelet and the ankle monitor, that if you had money to afford $250 a month for the process and the technical details, you could do that. And I can't imagine there wasn't some extreme, unique situation where they could pay for private security guards to monitor, to report. It's just interesting to me that with all the money he has and all the resources he has, they couldn't craft some solution that lets him be under some form of house arrest. And again, it sounds like special treatment, but the truth of the matter is, to incarcerate somebody like him is expensive to all of us. We're taxpayers, and he's got to have unique situations. You can't put him in general population where, everyone wants a piece of him and everyone wants to be his friend and everyone. So maybe some solution where his money could help us craft. I mean, he could build his separate jail cell, and we could keep him there. Just interesting to me that they sort of said, nope, you're going to be treated not like everybody else, but a lot like everybody else. Having money doesn't do it. So I wouldn't want to be those judges. There's sort of a no-win situation for the judge. And it sounds like they're erring on the side of caution. We're going to do what we would do for anybody else, which is keep him incarcerated for fear he flees. And then it's on us. This guilty person or this potentially guilty person gets to go on and live their life because the judge let them have bond. It flips from he's the bad person to now the judge made a mistake. That's what judges don't want.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second, if we're going back in the timeline of Diddy, there were federal raids performed on his home back in March. So obviously he knew about it then. He could infer, okay, they're going to investigate something. And speaking with his legal team, he again could infer charges could be coming down the line. So if Diddy was going to run, he had all the time in the world, 6 months between those raids and then when he was indicted, to run. I mean, is that something that his defense could highlight and say, hey, he could have left but didn't?
I think you should practice law because that's an excellent argument. I think it's a 100% correct argument, which is he had the opportunity to flee, except that sometimes people don't think rationally. Some people that are in power often think, I can get away with this, I can get away with this. And then when they finally realize they can't get away with it is when they try to look at other options. So yes, it's a good argument that he had all the time in the world to try to get away. If he knew this was coming, he should have seen it, and he didn't run. That's taking the approach that we're going to trust people. And unfortunately, not everybody trusts people, and he's going to be locked up until they decide on whether he's guilty or innocent or takes a plea. But yes, that's the argument I'd be making if I was his defense lawyer. What are you afraid of? He could have left 100 times, and he didn't. And he will give you any safeguards you want. And he'll pay for the safeguards. Even though he shouldn't have to, he'll pay whatever it takes so that he doesn't have to be in jail because he's innocent right now.
His defense team did bring an interesting bail package, kind of what you're talking about, a GPS monitor so that people could know where he was, a restriction on the people who could come visit him, specifically women. A lot of people were going to co-sign on this, and it was going to be $50 million. And this was denied 2 times. But now there may be a win for Diddy, potentially, that a new judge has been assigned to the case.
The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on the bench. waiting for the reaction. But Diddy didn't stop. His words came faster now, his tone more frantic. He said he's willing to do anything, to avoid going back to that cell. He said he's not trying to escape responsibility, that he understands the sentence, but that prison has become a place where he's not sure he can survive. Those who were there said it was one of the most emotional moments of the entire case. Diddy's voice cracked as he said he's haunted by the attack that happened just weeks before. He said he wakes up in cold sweats, still hearing the echoes of that night. He told the court that every time he hears footsteps approaching his cell, his heart races, terrified it might happen again. He said that he's lost faith in the system, that the world has turned on him, that he feels like he's already been punished more than enough by everything he's lost. His music, his legacy, his name, gone. His friends and partners, gone. The people he once trusted, silent.
Led me here. And if I can communicate differently moving forward, maybe the ultimate sentence, even if convicted, could be better, perhaps could lead to bond eventually. But it can be very difficult in segregation. And his lawyers have to stop blaming and excusing and talking about how difficult the experience is, because here's what a judge is going to say. If you were so concerned about what these filthy living conditions would be like in a detention center, if you were so concerned about your safety, you wouldn't have obstructed justice. You would not have, according to the government, created victims over a sustained period of time. Until he changes his message, more problems are going to follow.
And Diddy allegedly has been accused of using different drugs in the past. Even prosecutors have said on the night he was arrested that there was allegedly pink cocaine in his hotel room. Do you think that there's any chance he could be going through withdrawals during his adjustment behind bars right now?
There's no question. People who know they're going to prison who have been on medications, either illegal or illegal, it would be wise to understand the Bureau of Prisons might not prescribe you what you like. And if you're taking illegal drugs, unless you're engaging in the prison hustle, you're not going to get it. It would be easier to get the drugs and engage in the prison hustle in general population, but not when you're on lockdown for 23 hours a day. So certainly it is a brutal adjustment if you are on no drugs, but certainly if you are withdrawing, isolated 23 hours a day without getting things that you can get the snap of a finger, it makes the decision or the process that much harder, which is why I can assure you, based on what happened with Epstein, the high profile nature of the failures of this prison in the past, including some judges not even sending prisoners there because they were so concerned about their safety, you can expect staff is watching him, not 22, 23, 24 hours a day. They do not want more problems.
And this is a man going from private chefs and food from across the world to a set menu, just like any other detainee or inmate. What can you tell us about the food and the commissary in a place like the Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn?
It's a difference. That much I can tell you. You're going to have a lot of starchy food, cereals. If you get any vegetables at all, they're old, so to speak. They are not fresh. Same fruits and vegetables, no good. A lot of processed food, some rice and beans and muffins and things that generally most people don't like to eat. It's not terribly healthy. And again, the government would say that is a consequence of this process. So certainly it is an adjustment. Most people will lose weight. And it's hard because he can't even really exercise in this environment. There's no outdoor, like I've said before, it's not one of these camps where you can walk around a track. Even in a high security penitentiary like Atlanta, there's going to be a track and outdoors. When you're in a detention center, locked down 23 hours a day, not eating healthy foods or getting your medications, it could test even the strongest person. And again, that's what I would say to him. Your family is watching. There are people, so many are critical of him, I understand, but there are also those that love and support him who are watching. So as crazy as it sounds to some, and I've been called crazy, it's an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, to express to his family, others have gone through misery and struggle. They have emerged strong, with dignity, with a plan. And as I said earlier, once he embraces a better message, that it's not about him and how miserable his living situation is, but rather people he might have hurt, that's when he can get on the right side and get towards eventually getting out of there, and also a shorter sentence with better messaging.
And his lawyers did fight unsuccessfully this week to get him out on that bail package. Do you think in his mind, him being Diddy, that he really just didn't believe he would end up in jail where he has to remain now until trial?
There's no question. He presumed, because it would be very difficult for someone like to be a flight risk. Okay, so you figure, I'm selling the jet. Here are the keys to the jet. Here's the collateral to my $50 million mansion in Florida.
He told the court that he's become a ghost of the man he used to be. The judge remained stoic, but there was a clear tension in the air. Diddy's lawyers jumped in to support the plea, describing the psychological breakdown their client was experiencing. They said he's suffering from trauma, insomnia, and panic attacks. They said he's living in constant fear, that the isolation and hostility have pushed him to his breaking point. The prosecution, however, stood firm. They argued that this was just another attempt by Diddy to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. They pointed out that countless inmates have had to endure difficult conditions, and that Diddy's fame doesn't make him exempt from justice. But even as they spoke, the image of Diddy standing there, crying, shaking, broken, was impossible to ignore. People in the courtroom could hear his quiet sobs as he lowered his head. The sound of a man who used to control everything now begging for mercy hit harder than any argument. His tears weren't just for the judge, they were for himself, for his family, for the life that
I am flying to New York on my own accord. I will turn myself in. So you rationalize or convince yourself I'm so high profile in public and I'm going there on my own. They're not going to take me in. But we know the government likes to make examples out of people. And the government's doing a good job here. They're focusing what too many people tend to forget about, the victims. So while it's difficult for Diddy, I know, to be confined in a cell for 23 hours a day, it might not be as hard as the victims they allege he created. Let's focus on them. Let's put them first. And if he can begin to do that, he's going to get more of what he wants, freedom and potentially bond. But certainly, if I were a betting person, I would have bet that he was going to walk out of there into his mansion on 24 hours a day lockdown, even with security guards outside the house. He's not going anywhere, but at least he's in the mansion.
And going from mega millions of dollars, a huge mansions, private jet, to a jail cell that's reportedly plagued with issues at the detention center, which is not uncommon for a lot of jails and prisons across the United States. But do you believe that his life could be in danger if he's ever released into the general population?
I don't think, at least for quite some time, if convicted, that he'll be released to the general population. There are prisoners who like headlines, who loathe sex offenders, who might loathe him as a celebrity. The Bureau of Prisons cannot have any problems at this time. So if he's ever in general population, it will be quite some time. By then, we'll have forgotten about this case. As we love stardom, eventually we're going to forget about this case and move on to something else. It will be quite some time. And that's a consequence of his celebrity. Rather than being around people and communicating and being in that general population, he is totally isolated, which can really test his resolve. I have no doubt his family, his friends, those who love and support him are worried about him. And I encourage him to respond as best as he properly can. But he has a difficult road ahead of him.
And someone who was worth hundreds of millions, even a reported $1 billion before, do you think it'll present any type of problem that he could end up getting any type of special treatment?
Certainly, there could be staff who admire him, sycophants who want to kiss up to him in predictable fashion because he's a celebrity. There will be some prisoners totally enamored by him. Some won't care. So you could expect at some point prisoners could offer, it could be drugs. We see iPhones that are very pervasive inside of these prisons. It's been a huge problem for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So it's also going to ensure that he doesn't, Oscar Wilde said he could resist anything but temptation. If there's temptation presented to him and he gives in, what does that do? It could exacerbate his struggles because the government can say he can't even control himself in a lockdown environment. That's why he's not free, Your Honor. So temptations eventually will make its way to him, potentially from staff and prisoners. And if he cares most about his family and getting the best outcome possible, it's going to require him to say, no, thank you. As much as I would love this drug or this iPhone or something that is inappropriate inside of this prison, my highest value is my freedom. No, thank you. And it's not always easy to do when you are used to getting everything you want for so long and then suddenly you are without. It requires discipline.
And like I had mentioned before, I'm sure Diddy and his defense attorney were both left stunned, knowing that he'll now have to prepare for his trial behind bars as he wasn't given bail. What can you tell us about a high-profile celebrity like Diddy now having to prep for trial in a federal detention center?
I think it was the philosopher George Santayana that said, those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. So we have these high-profile celebrities, Elizabeth Holmes, Sam Bankman-Fried, Robert Menendez, who was convicted at trial, tried to blame the conviction or the conduct on his sick wife. So we have those who have come before us who continue to go down this path of blaming and excusing, never identifying with victims, or at least acknowledging they could have done anything wrong. And I would say, if that's what you want to do, cool. Own it and understand the consequences that follow.
That was slipping away from him. In that moment, it became clear that Diddy is no longer the man who once said can't stop, won't stop. The mogul who built an empire on confidence and control was gone. What's left is a man terrified of the world he's been thrown into. A man realizing that power and money mean nothing when the cell door closes at night. Reports from inside say that after the last hearing, he returned to his cell completely silent. He refused to eat, refused to talk, refused to leave his bed. The attack, the fear, the constant paranoia, it's all caught up with him. The guards say he barely moves now, that he just stares into space, whispering to himself. He's said to be terrified of going to sleep, afraid that when he closes his eyes, something might happen. His lawyers are doing everything they can. They've filed for a transfer, for medical evaluation, for protective custody, but with each filing, the chances seem slimmer. The system moves slowly, and Diddy's reality moves fast. Every day inside feels like a year. Every night feels like a lifetime.
That, when all eyes are on them, that nothing happens on their watch. So we do know that Diddy's lawyers did say that he's ready and willing to fight the charges and ready to fight the allegations against him, and he's of sound mind. So it doesn't surprise me that he's placed on suicide watch by corrections simply for his own safety and in order for the prison to sort of CYA.
So we're talking about this case simply because Diddy is a huge celebrity, a high-profile defendant who's now placed behind bars, a far cry from the mansions that we're used to seeing him in. What are some of the issues with having a high-profile defendant? Does it make things more dangerous, more difficult? What do you think?
Well, being high profile in prison, based on knowledge from some of my own clients, is somewhat worrying for them, especially when they are coming from an environment which was a polar opposite from what they are experiencing in prison. So it's a shock. It's frightening. And of course, they have to deal with the real reality now that they are behind bars and they're facing criminal charges. It also presents a added sort of hurdle for us as attorneys who are defending a client like that, because we are obviously cognizant of the big change in their life that they're dealing with psychologically, and then also obviously the legal aspects of things, but also the court of public opinion. You are constantly looking at how the public is receiving your client or a defendant when they are high profile, and you are sort of tending to their needs because now they are dealing with such a dramatic change in their life. They went from mansion to prison, and sometimes that's a hurdle along with the legal fight all its own.
And then there's the question of Diddy's communication. Who's he making contact with from the inside? So Diddy has pleaded not guilty to these charges, so of course we're expecting him to bring a strong defense with his attorneys, his team. Obviously they're going to be preparing, but does it add a layer of challenge, the fact that Diddy is behind bars? What does it look like for attorneys hoping to meet with him? Would they have their own rooms? Would they talk over those phone things we see in movies? What would it really look like?
So when you have a client who is behind bars, you are meeting with them on legal visits, and you are talking to them on a secured line, which is an attorney or legal call where it's not being recorded and it's afforded that privilege, that attorney-client privilege, that privacy there. But it does present hurdles when having a client behind bars, because you're sort of really reliant on the prison schedule, B, the prison calls. You can't call your client, they're calling you. So even if you have something that you need to talk to your client about urgently, you got to wait until you get that prison call from prison, or you're making that visit yourself to jail to have a legal visit. So it's always easier to represent someone who has been out on bail, because they could come to your office or you could visit them, or even if they're on house arrest, they're typically allowed to come to your law office. So it does present that added hurdle when you're representing someone who is remanded or in jail. But of course, we have to do what we have to do as defense attorneys, and we make it work.
We talked about the side of his defense, obviously speaking with his legal team, but what about his family? We have seen some reports that Diddy has had brief phone calls with his children. What would that look like? Is it a phone call privilege system that he would get more calls as time goes on if he has good behavior, that kind of thing?
So inmates are afforded time to talk to their family. Of course,
Those close to the situation say he's been writing letters to the judge, to his family, to people from his past. Some are apologies, some are cries for help, others are ramblings, written in moments of panic. His handwriting is said to be shaky, the words uneven. It's clear that his mind isn't in the same place it used to be. The man who once stood at the top of the industry now spends his days fearing for his life. Every sound in the hallway makes him flinch. Every shadow feels like a threat. The same man who once threw million-dollar parties now eats off a metal tray in a concrete cell, surrounded by people who despise him. His plea to the judge isn't just about freedom anymore, it's about survival. It's about holding on to what little sanity he has left. He's not asking for fame, not asking for money, not asking for redemption. He's asking for safety. The irony is brutal. The same man who once inspired power and luxury now stands in front of a judge, begging not to die in prison. The same voice that once shouted confidence into microphones now trembles with fear. The same hands that once held awards now tremble as they clutch courtroom papers. As the hearing ended, the judge promised to review the motion, but made no guarantees. Diddy was escorted out by guards, still wiping his tears, his face pale, his body hunched forward. The cameras caught it all, the look of a man who's finally realizing that there might be no escape. Back inside, his lawyers are preparing for the next move. They're planning to appeal again, to push harder, to use every legal tool available, but no matter what happens next, one thing is certain: the man once known for controlling every narrative has lost control completely. Diddy's life now exists between four cold walls, and every passing day breaks him down a little more. The panic, the fear, the desperation, they've replaced everything he used to be. His plea to the judge is more than just a legal request, it's the voice of a man who's reached the end of himself. He's not asking to reclaim his fame, he's asking to survive another night,